with a wide kind of reaction of people thinking that perhaps it's better not to use the word Islam when referring to ISIS, and others who talk about ISIS as being very Islamic. So you get the entire sort of range of controversy which is going on in public and academic discussions today on this particular topic. So I do want to be clear about what it is I'm trying to suggest here. Certainly, ISIS is, at best, an interpretation of Islam. Where I think the mistake comes about is to think that ISIS is somehow a more authentic version of Islam because it uses these kinds of Islamic resonances which I'm going to be talking about. In fact, the point I would want to make and what differentiates ISIS from what we might call that sort of authentic vision of Islam, if such a thing exists, would be to emphasize that ISIS uses these historical resonances in a very modern way that emerges out of its political and social context. Now, another way of putting that would be to say that certainly the appeal to Muslim principles is an important part of ISIS's platform, but that shouldn't be mistaken for saying that Islamic principles drive the actions of ISIS. The history of Islam is vast, and it's always possible to pick out elements that will serve to support and justify or motivate actions that fit the pragmatic goals. The importance here is to recognize that the establishment of this diwan is an important part, or is seen to be an important part of the development of this dawla, of the Islamic State. And in fact, its attempt to try and demonstrate that it is a functioning state. That is, that its role in providing social services is a central part of what it does. And this is also, as I might have occasion to say later, an important part in revolutionary theory which lies behind the Islamic State. It has to get to that point of actually being able to administer social services. And this picture here is a page from a booklet which IS produced, which talks about its social services, its observance of markets and those sorts of things in order to keep control of what's going on. Now, the final thing is what in fact has become quite famous as the flag of ISIS. And here one sees a larger version of the same thing in an older form, because you notice, if you can read the Arabic, that it's the older name of the Islamic State. It says in Iraq and Syria across the bottom. Now, of course, this has the Muslim Shahada, the testimony of faith, across the top. There is no God but God. What it has as a significant element, though, is this, what is described as a seal in the middle, but it does simply say that Muhammad is the messenger of God. This is understood to be a ring which the early caliphs wore, and it was then lost at one point in history in early times, which was, the reports about it are symbolic. It's a loss, it means the loss of authority. It was refound, apparently, in the 16th century and taken to Topkapi Palace in Istanbul as a relic of Muhammad. And this then becomes the signet ring of a relic, which is then taken over, but to give it all that certain sense of the prophetic background to the state itself. One might say that in thinking about foreign interventions, ways of trying to control the Islamic State and its warfare, one does need to take into account the challenges in dealing with an apocalyptic movement, of the wanting to avoid, in a certain sense, a self-fulfilling prophecy that the people who are embarking on this are actually eager to see the apocalypse brought on. With that, I'll stop. Thank you. And there's another part which comes in, interesting enough, I don't know a great deal about this, but in American military strategists of some sorts, the importance put upon the use of social media, of information networks and so forth as a part of military strategy. And this too, the Islamic State seems to have adopted. Because I would add that this revolutionary theory, I think this is one of the things which Muslims particularly react strongly against. That this really does violate every principle that Muslims would feel was central to Islam. Muslims may feel that the goal of establishing a caliphate is a good one, but to do so through revolutionary activities that end up harming many people, including, in fact, mainly fellow Muslims, is against any sense of upholding public interest, which would be seen as central to what Islam stands for. And that's what really separates the Islamic State from most other, in fact, what we might call jihadi movements.